Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Carmen Juliá, and I am curator at Spike Island. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a new edition of Behind the Scenes, a series dedicated to studio visits with artists and makers based at Spike Island. Today, I'm in conversation with artist and writer Valda Jackson. But before I introduce her practice, I would like to mention a couple of things in regard to the event. The conversation will last about 45 minutes, and we will be taking questions at the end. We encourage you to use the live chat function in YouTube, so please write any questions you may have throughout the event. Please note that the stream and the chat are being recorded and that we are moderating the chat, so you can refer to our code of conduct for more details. So Valda Jackson is an artist and a writer currently working on her first novel. She works in sculpture, painting, printmaking, and moving image, creating complex narratives that reflect and question our past and present with intent on influencing our future. Her work is about existence, survival, individual entitlement, privilege, and dignity. In 2017, her collaborative public art practice, Jackson and Harris, won the Marsh Award for Excellence in Public Sculpture from the Public Monuments and Sculpture Association, and is currently commissioned by the Peabody at St. John's Hill in Clapham, London, for a series of public sculptures integrated into the architecture. Valda is one of the 4 artists shortlisted by the Windrush Commemoration Committee and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to put forward a proposal for the National Windrush Monument at Waterloo Station that will be a permanent tribute to a generation of arrivals from the Caribbean to Britain, from the arrival of the Empire Windrush in 1948 and in the decades that followed. So Valda, many congratulations on your recent nomination. You have been nominated along with other 3 artists, and there's currently an ongoing public consultation to decide on the winner, which will be announced later this year, right? So well, welcome and congratulations. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about the proposals, the ideas, and the impetus behind it? You're muted.
On mute, okay. Well, it really feels like an enormous privilege for me to have been invited to put forward a proposal for this monument. It's very much a part of the work that I do, the work that I've been doing for the past 35 years. And my initial sort of feelings were that it just had to be right. I mean, I do feel that way about everything, all the areas of my practice. But this just seemed like the perfect opportunity for me. This is the perfect thing, because it is what I do in every area of my practice.
So we could say that your practice have been heavily influenced by the fact that your parents came here
yes.
in the 1950s, and then was it the 1950s or?
Well, it was actually 1960s. It was early 1960s. 1960s.
Yeah, and your experience of migration as a child, you came here from Jamaica when you were 5 years old, right? And you moved to you moved to Birmingham, right? That's where you settled.
Yes. So
yeah, that's
I
where you grew up. Yeah.
Yes, and I grew up in Birmingham. I went to school in Birmingham. I came to Bristol in my 20s to study fine art. But I would say that my experience and my culture is definitely sort of Brummy, but also Jamaican, because we were definitely in a kind of, not exactly a cocoon, but we were a Christian family. We were really ensconced in the church. So at weekends, Saturdays, Sundays, it was all about services and you know, Sunday school and preparing for Sunday school and Sunday service, and then evening service. And then, of course, there was school, which was life in the wider community, the sort of English and British community. And I do feel that this experience of living, and I want to say dealing with, but yeah, it's a good word, good term, dealing with everything that was coming at us, and certainly coming at me in the 60s, going to school in the 60s. These are the things that are still, that still inform my practice. And the coping strategies. And also that religious element, the sort of what people from the Caribbean were doing and the way that they were living, what they did in order to cope with the situation that they found themselves in. I don't need to say that they were in a, you know, the situation where they arrived feeling that this was a great opportunity and they were going somewhere that they were wanted, only to find that actually they were not wanted. They just, their labour was necessary.
Yeah, but it wasn't a welcoming.
It was not welcoming.
Yeah.
And this is what we were brought into. So as children, we arrived to join our parents, and we didn't receive the sort of welcome that conducive to good health and well-being. And I think that my work reflects elements of that, but I also feel it's also about our presence, our present and our presence, but also about, there is, I hope that there are elements of hope and joy within my work also.
Sure. I think one of the things, the work is provisionally titled. I know it's not the it's not kind of the final title, but you gave it a title that is "The In-Between is Place, Our Past Within Our Present." And I am curious about this in-between place, because obviously you were talking about growing up between two cultures, right? So the culture that your parents brought with them, and then the culture that you found here in Britain, right? And also this idea of the past within the present, right? And I guess one could say that the past is only of interest to the present in the way it affects this present, right? So perhaps could you talk about those in-between spaces, you know, culturally, but also in terms of temporality?
It is a working title, but yes, we can't fully understand our present without knowing the past, and what we learn or what we gain can enable us to affect and impact on the future.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the in-between place is what a station is.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody goes to the station to be at the station. Or do they? I suppose.
I guess you want to get somewhere, really, unless you're stuck, obviously.
I mean,
then you're
there
stuck.
are people who may well need to be there for cover.
Exactly.
But we are generally there. It is an in-between place that is, you know, you're on your way somewhere else. And so it has this dual meaning. It has different kinds of meaning. But not know, you know, it does feel that it is the case that knowing your past can enable you to grow in the future. And at the same time, not knowing must create turmoil, since we need to nurture and to heal wounds, but also we need to appraise our successes and our heritage. We do need to have elements and live elements of our past on a day-to-day basis, but also to know which bits to put to one side in order to just function.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Ignoring it or not knowing it must be far worse, I think, than...
Well, I guess it could be very traumatic, because then there are things there and you don't know the origin of those things, or, you know, there
but
are
you still have it in you. You still
exactly
those, the effects of those things.
Yeah. So we're seeing now images of your proposal, and I wonder if you could describe it a little bit. So there's 3 figures, and maybe you could talk about the significance of these figures, their positioning, their scale, the space between them, and what they represent.
Yeah, the space between them.
Or maybe start with, who are these people?
Who are they? Well, there is a male and a female, adults, and then there is one small child sitting. So the man and woman stand. The child sits at the end of the platform. The man could be in the motion, in the act of turning towards the woman, or he might just be turning to look across the way. They might or might not know each other. For me, it was important that they don't appear as one unit, because it enables people, the viewer, to decide. The viewer could decide that they are a family unit or one group, or you might look at it and feel that they are separate individuals, or the child might be with the woman, but that's not necessarily so. It just, I feel that it's important that all the different stories that exist around Windrush and around our history and our present, all of those stories need to have some kind of outlet, and that they should be represented here. So I feel that there were few families who came as one unit, and therefore they can be present within this work, but all of those people who came in, you know, individually on their own are also represented. yeah, the child is apparently, appears to be on her own or his own, but that child really isn't. It's the child represents both the past and the present. And of course, we also know that the child represents the future. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make them all of human scale. So the scale is human.
All right.
The figures will be larger than life, but fractionally. Mm-hmm. I wanted human scale because you can get closer to them, and the closer you can get to something, the more you see. Mm-hmm. Scale is important for feelings of, I don't know, sameness, of normality. They are of a scale that a person can identify with them. Human scale it's very human, and it's relatable. I wanted them to be approachable. Yeah. So if it were possible for people to step up onto the platform and move between and around the figures, that would be the ideal. I believe for safety reasons, that's not permitted, but the platform itself isn't, for me, it's not in stone. It could be relinquished. I could not have the platform if it means that people could walk around and in between them, if that's allowed. And then, of course, it means that the child would be sitting on the chair that I had sort of originally wanted, that the child is sitting on a chair, and next to the child is the empty chair, that the child turning towards that empty chair with the proffered gift would encourage individuals to sit with her or with him. The gift, I'm sort of seeing the children are gifts to all of us.
So just because maybe people can't see in the image, the detail, but the child is holding, is it like a little, it looks like a little ball in between his hand. So I just, the child is holding in their hand, right? It's like in their fingers. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a small object that the child obviously values, but yet is prepared to share. This was originally a bell. I wanted a bell for the child to be holding a bell that whoever sits with the child could produce a chime, a bit of music that they could hear and hopefully enjoy. I'm not allowed. Sound isn't permitted in this, and so that the gift of sound is now an object that can be offered. That's being offered.
Okay, so you also talk about this sculpture, that this sculpture aims to represent the diversity of people who migrate to Britain from the Caribbean, and also those who were born here. So it kind of speaks of many generations, and in a way that's why their clothes are quite plain, and it's what you said, what you were talking about, that it's not like it's not presented as a family, it's presented as like individual people, and it looks at the past, it looks at the present, and then introduces the figure of the child that is making a connection with future. Right? So it kind of is incredibly open in that sense, right? that I just wanted to know a bit more about your decision to create a monument to commemorate something that happened in the past, and that is actually, you know, taking that past, bringing that past here into the present, and kind of talking about many generations, and not just that particular moment in time.
Yeah, I feel that, you know, every time we see those images of new arrivals, it's the arrivee, they are othered. So for this, I really want to move from this idea of newness, of people just arriving. Because,
yeah.
Yes, people arrived on that particular boat in 1948.
Yeah.
But it's not, this is to commemorate a people, it's to commemorate a whole generation. It's also acknowledging those who came before that date and those who have come after that date, but it's also acknowledging and representing those who have the lived experience of being here and of living life here and having children and them having children. Because, you know, it is one thing to celebrate a particular moment in time, but it's another to actually welcome the people who are here, and it's acknowledging the presence. I keep using that word every time I say it. I think, oh my gosh, I'm saying that a lot. It's acknowledging us, saying that you came here at some point. Some of you are now born here. Some of us have been born here. And we've had children here, and they will have children here. And I haven't yet, I probably have said the word, but it's also about ownership and belonging. So the moments that you say, right, here's a sculpture of new arrivals, it's almost stuck in that moment of them being just arrived, when actually we are here.
Yeah.
We're here, and we will be here into the future. We are going to be here, and we belong here.
You also talk a lot about humanizing, you know, and putting kind of a face to this mass migration and to all those experiences. You talk about separation. You talk about the people who, I mean, the stories about, you know, families that had to be separated, and some came, like a parent came early, and then trying to bring the family over. And that,
yes, I sort of want in this to acknowledge that, to acknowledge the trauma of the separations, and that there are those who are, there are children who were left by their parents, who came here to work and make a better life for themselves and their children. And those parents didn't necessarily desert those children. They would be sending home parcels and money. But sometimes those children never were sent for. So some of those children grew up in the Caribbean and never joined their parents in England. Mm-hmm. And so those children are also being acknowledged in this sculpture where the child sits. That child could represent a child waiting to be sent for, or she could, or he could be a child who has arrived, who has been sent for and is here waiting. Or it could be a child in the future. It's everybody's child. Mm. And the space, going back to that space, the space for the viewer to bring their own stories, mm-hmm. whether it's their own story or their neighbours or their friend or family members, that's really important. So it doesn't exclude people by being, I don't want to say the perfect little group of, father, mother, child, mm-hmm. because for most people, that wasn't the life. That wasn't the life they remember or have heard stories of from their parents or grandparents. And there is, just for the authenticity and integrity, I think. And also, it feels to me as though to not acknowledge all of that, all of those stories, all of those very different experiences, is almost to deny the humanity of swathes of people that have, it feels as though if you're going to make something that people can identify with, then don't introduce I'm going to leave that one.
It's a huge responsibility to...
Sorry, I was just going to say that there is this kind of element of ambiguity around each figure, and it's that ambiguity that enables everyone, or most people who an individual, to be able to come to those figures and bring their stories or their feelings, and I really want people to be able to come and sit with this, and to be able to contemplate the work or their story or whatever it is that they're bringing and what they're holding, rather than giving them too much story.
Yeah.
It excludes them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been deliberately left open for interpretation, for people to be able to kind of put a story behind each of those characters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then in the process of developing the proposal, you consulted with a community of people who identify as being part of the Windrush Generation, right? So, and that included people with origins in Barbados, Dominica, Jamaica, Mauritius, of Indian heritage, and of Saint Lucia. So could you tell us a little bit how that process worked, and how you connected with them, and why you decided to do that kind of consultation process?
Yes. Well, in some instances, I was phoning people and having very long chats, and I was and so these would have been people in my own address book and contacts. And I spoke to family. I spoke to family in England. I spoke to in Birmingham, in Jamaica, in the US. And I also spoke to, so I actually did begin with family and then into the family and friends bit. So I was speaking to close friends, but I also sent out emails to different people who sent emails on to other people, and found this group of people, some of whom I have known for a long time, some I've only just met and will get to know during the process of this work. And given that there are people from all over and people who live in different places, our stories were really very similar. They were similar, but also very individual and different. But this sort of gave, this was affirmation for me. This confirmed the sort of the way that I was already moving towards giving these figures space and allowing different stories to be read within them. What I find interesting also is that someone in the group, the consultation group, filmmaker Lisa Harold, was also shared stories of traveling in her making films. She has worked with people from South America and different places, and these people, I think there was also, she talked about a group of people in New Zealand that she was working with, and they said, but those stories are our stories too. And with empire and migration, our stories that we think of as our stories that are unique to us, when you travel around and speak to other people with shared kind of experiences, what you're finding is that those stories are very, very similar. And so anyone from anywhere can identify with the story of migrants, or yes, migrants, people who have to migrate for whatever reason, whether it's for work or just to escape from poverty or war. Whatever it is, there are similarities within this.
Yeah, I think anyone who migrates, who actually experience migration, can easily identify, you know, a lot of similarities with other people who have experienced the same type of migration, as you said. Yeah. So how long did you work with this group, and how long did you have also to develop the proposal?
How long did I have to develop the proposal?
Just roughly.
Well, from I can't remember when the deadline was now, but it was a couple of, it was probably a few months. But this group that I sort of now have and will go back to over the period, I suppose we've now been, our first meet was, I think it was in late May.
Okay.
I think it was in May. Yeah.
And do you think you'll work with them again for other things?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was it a very positive
it's really
experience of working in that way?
Yes. And in fact, what I'm feeling is, why have I not done this before?
Oh,
Why
right.
have I just secluded in my studio when there are swathes of people, when there are all these people who are just amazing, that I can talk with and share and just do the journey with them. Yes, that was a really great experience. I'm really, really glad that I did that.
It's great that you can keep those connections, and then who knows, it might lead to something completely different.
Yeah.
Future.
Some of them don't know yet, but they are going to be a part of my whole working experience.
You also have a very well-established public art practice in partnership with the artist Rod Harris. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to work in public art, and perhaps just talk a bit about your most recent works, for example, the work that you do with the Peabody Trust, and also the big billboard still holding on in Margate.
Okay. Well, the public art thing is, while we were at college, I was at college with Rod.
And you were at college in Bristol?
Yes, we were at college here in Bristol, and Ibstock Brick Company gave a load of bricks to the college and said, yeah, see what you can do with that. And
so just like that, you go into public.
I'm not even sure how or why it was there, but you keep walking past this pile of bricks and thinking, what do they want us to do with this? Fine artists do a pile of bricks, brick clay. But there are nice bags in the ceramics area that's bagged up and clean and smooth. But for some reason, I did do a little thing with it, and then thought, yeah, I don't really like that. But Rod Harris, who was working in ceramics, he did take to it, and I used to go in and sort of do some drawing with him, and just sort of, just let's get this right, sort of thing. And then on leaving college, things just kind of slowly happened, that a lot of his work he'd just given to the brick company. So they had a sort of an exhibition space, and architects were in a position to see the work, and we kind of got work through them. And also the brick company, when people went to the brick company saying, oh, could you do this for us? And he would think, well, no, but I know some sculptors. And so we got work that way at the beginning, and that just kind of developed over the years. So it has been 30 odd years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Of making that sort of work.
Yeah. And how about the big billboard? Because that's different, right? That's
the billboard was the first thing that I had. It was the first commission that was, it was a small commission, but it's huge. So it's really fun.
It is huge. Yeah. Can you, so how many meters across?
It was very high. It was really high and really wide. So it was about 12 meters across and about,
oh wow, yeah,
about almost 4 meters high.
yeah,
But it was the first time that I was actually able to use my own studio work for and that it was wholly my stuff, the stuff I do, the obsession with the historical or you know, the personal and historical, and the history of my community that I grew up in. And so this was the first time that I was literally talking about Windrush in that sense, you know, and it was going out into the public. Whereas before, the work I do in the studio, quietly do in the studio and just, you know, on my own, rather than with a community of other people who can, you know, that work was felt very introvert and personal, and yet this commission for the Billboard was also intimate and personal, but huge and in public. And it sort of shifted my perception really of what is okay to be out in the public arena.
All right. So like, in which way?
In which way?
Yeah.
You mean how?
Yeah, how did it change, like, your perception of what is okay to put out there
in the public arena? Yeah. I mean, even with this commission for the Windrush monument, one of my questions to my consultation group was, how can you leave a small child in a space with space around her or him? How is that a thing that you do? You know, it felt that this child is vulnerable, but yet what I got from my group was, yes, we're all vulnerable, but we go out there anyway, day after day after day.
All right.
And we can't hide, and we mustn't not be out there.
So who are these children represented in the Billboard?
They are the children of generations of people of grown-ups, parents who move about, who move from one place to another. And they represent those children who were left behind, those children who came again. They are the children of that generation. And yeah, and I got the images from, you know, I asked people for their photographs, and I used drawings that I already had and paintings that I already made. And so that was a kind of collage of the two different things.
And do you draw from life, or it's always photographs?
I do draw from life and mirrors. I use models, I use mirrors, I use pictures, you know, what does an elbow look like when it's in that position? I will model something in order that I can draw it. It's desperation, really, because, you know, you have to pay models usually, and when your own children are grown and they, you know, they don't want to sit for you.
Did you used to draw your children when they were young?
I used to make them stand on tables and do things so that I could get the shape of the arms doing that. But they were never, I was never drawing portraits of them in that way. But yes, I have used my children, I've used my sister's child, and I've used other people, friends' children.
Yeah.
I've knocked on a door of, there was a dolls hospital in just opposite where I used to live in Southville in Bristol many years ago, and I knew they had a small girl, and I needed the torso of a small girl to get the shape right, and they allowed me to borrow their daughter. That was other thing. She was a lovely girl, and so I drew her hands and her torso. That was really useful for me. So yes, I will use, you take what you can.
Of course. Yeah. So I just wanted to just touch a little bit about your studio practice, which you have mentioned, and it's something that you've been developing for over the last 30 years, right, or even longer. And you often talk about wanting to give visibility to the community in which you grew up when you arrived in Britain, and that a lot of your work is about that community. Can you tell us a little bit more about that community? Are you still in touch with that community? Is that still something that is part of your life?
Well, interestingly, I sort of drifted from church when I was about 16. And so although there are obvious contacts, in fact, one of the people in one of the small boys in the Billboard was someone from church days who I still can contact, and he will kindly offer up images when I beg him.
I guess there were many children there, right, as well as adults, part of this community. There were,
yes, indeed, and so and I'm in contact with very few, because it was that sort of Christian religious community where when someone backslides and is no longer a Christian, then you do have to not have too much contact with them because they are now sinners. And as a sinner, I wasn't really expecting that I would be still visiting their homes. And so, yeah, leaving the community is actually leaving the community. And the only, the fact that I some years later, left home meant that I wasn't seeing people visiting, because I wasn't at home where my mother was, and she was receiving visitors from church, but I was outsider, really, in that community. But of course, I have a community of women friends here in Bristol who I can share my experiences with, friends, but not from Birmingham those days. But of course, I still do have my sisters.
Okay.
I still have sisters, and my mother and my aunt, who's in the States, who looked after us when we were left in Jamaica. We were not left abandoned. We were with grandmother and
with family. G,
my Auntie G, who I write about, and she's lovely. Dear.
We're getting near the end of these, but I just wanted to just to say just something about your painting and the way in which you kind of portray the relationship between women and child, because I noticed there's a lot of that in your painting, and also like the domestic interior, the intimacy. You were talking about the intimacy earlier on, and how you know, an intimate scene. You made it very public with that billboard, and also giving a space to the presence of the Black women and the Black subject generally. Can you expand a little bit on this, maybe?
Yeah, well, this was something, you know, when I was at college, what was it? One of the tutors said, you're perverse. It is perverse that you would be asking for a Black model. That is just perverse.
Oh. And
I did get one in the end.
Oh my God, that is just...
but I understood my perversion. So
which year was that? What year was
that? This was 1987 that he said that. I graduated in 89. So it's a good while ago. I'd like to think...
no, I don't think you cannot justify that. No.
For asking for a Black model.
Oh my God.
And even saying please. And to be fair, it went as high as the director, and he said, that is the director of fine art. I don't know if that's what they called him then, but anyway, he agreed that I should have a Black model. And I went out and found one, and that was great. And I still have this young woman in my head, and she pops up every now and then in images that I make. She is the seated woman in Seated Woman, a whole series of seated women that I've done. She is that seated woman. And she is the seated woman in the work that work that I did for the literary archaeology project. The head of a woman and a seated woman. She is that seated woman. So even though I had her in my space while I was at college, I had her for all of 6 weeks. It was so important to me that she is imprinted here, and she's just with me. That because
it's been a very close relationship that you felt with the model.
For me, it was. She represented so much.
Yeah.
At the first show that I had where this work was shown, someone had written in the book that this represents a whole people. And I just thought, yes, that is exactly how I wanted it to be. That it's not about this particular woman or girl. It represents much more.
Yeah.
It represents all of us. And yeah, I wanted, because when I was growing up, it felt as though I was always looking on the edge, felt as though I was on the edge looking, whether I was at church or at school, that I was just watching and being aware that we were not represented in any way that didn't just make us feel shame. And it's something I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So just to have make a different representation of us.
Yeah.
About entertaining or serving or waiting on or just standing there in the background, in the shadow, presenting flowers to Miss Olympia, the Manet.
That's a famous one. Yeah.
But actually, maybe just sitting and being offered flowers and tea and my obsession with little girls making tea and having dolls that look like them. Those are the normalizing of what is considered not normal or other.
I guess in that way you connect a lot with other artists who have been doing the same, like Claudette Johnson or Sonia Boyce, even Louvaina Himmet, this idea of normalizing the representation of Black people in Western painting, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We are nearly getting to the end of these now. So, but finally, I wanted to talk a bit about your writing, because you have published the shorter story, An Age of Reason, coming here in Closure, which was an anthology of Black British writers, edited by Peepal Tree Press, right? And the same story was again published in 2017 in Peepal Tree Book of Contemporary Caribbean Short Stories. And then last year, you completed an MA in Creative Writing at Bath University, and you're recently working on your first novel, and an extract of which will be published by Bath as part of an online anthology. So could you talk a little bit about where writing sits within your artistic practice?
I've always written and sort of scribbling, writing things on bits of paper in notebooks and so on. But I never considered that was that part of my work or practice, that part of work, those works were ever going to see the day, the light of day. But then a few years ago, I started to just kind of spend more time writing, and it feels as though there are many things that I can do in writing that can conjure up the sort of imagery that I want, but I couldn't do that in paint, and I wouldn't want to do it in sculpture. So in the writing, it's possible for me to really look at areas of life that I wouldn't want to show, physically draw or paint.
Okay.
And so my writing, currently I'm writing about the sort of generations coming here, the experience of a family trying to look after each other from different parts of the world. So the grandmother is still in Jamaica, but the parents and the children are now here. And just looking at the ways that people still, even though they're not together, how they still try to take care of each other. And I suppose that sort of ties in with this idea, I can't remember the name of the person who first used the term barrel children, but as someone who could be considered a barrel child, though for only a few years, because I was sent for. But there are still children in parts of the Caribbean and different parts of the world who are seen as barrel children, those children whose parents have to go somewhere to work, but send home parcels and barrels of things for the child and for the family who's looking after them. So yes, I'm the writing is very much a part of my practice, and I'm either doing one of those things, whether sculpture or the public art, or I'm writing, and sometimes trying to spin them all at the same time.
Great. Well, Valda, we just got to the end of these now. Yes. I look forward to reading your first novel, actually. You must let us know. And, we can perhaps have a little chat about it once it's published. So thank you very much. And it has been a great pleasure to speak with you today. And obviously many congratulations on your nomination and best of luck with it. You know, when do you find out? Do you know?
It's sometime in September. I have to do, we will be invited to do a presentation to the committee, and then they will make their decision and pass it on to the ministry. So there are quite a few weeks to go yet.
Well, yeah, well, good luck.
Thank you.
And yeah, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and a special thanks to my colleague at Spike Island, Olivia Jones. Please take a look at our website for more upcoming online events, including a panel discussion on the 26th of August, that's this Thursday, between selected 11 artists. River Cow, Sam Grant, and Gavi Sahar, hosted by Ian Hayden Smith. Okay, everyone, hope to see you soon again. Bye. Bye, Valda.